Desktop 2. There we go. I am recording and I am sharing. Let me make sure that I have the chat. Awesome. The chat is here and we are rolling. So arrays part 2. Arrays are awesome, first of all. I think that arrays are, they're like a general sort of programming thing. There's like a data structure that's generally used, but JavaScript really makes arrays fun. That you have a lot of different ways that you can take a list of something and you can transform it into something else, and you can go through item by item and do a bunch of stuff to it. So that aside, what are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about some more methods. We're going to talk about nested arrays. Yeah. I'm also being told Paddington Bear sequel also coming out. Okay, wait. They've had a Paddington Bear sequel. They had a second. Is this a trilogy? The Paddington Bear trilogy. The threequel. Oh, man. Okay. Awesome. I'm really glad that we're recording this so that that's there for posterity. Okay. Code. The splice method. What does splice do? Splice, it mutates the original array. It changes the original array. It's used to add or remove elements from the middle of an array instead of just like adding them from the beginning and end like popped and shift did. Its first argument is an index. The second argument is a count of elements to delete from the element, I think that's a little unclear. Let's write array. To delete from the array, starting at a provided index. It returns a new array with all of the removed elements. And down here, we'll be able to see that on line 13, we're logging out the original array and then logging out the return. So we have an original array here of George, John, and Thomas. Then we do single term precedence is equal to the result of calling splice on this names array. We're going to pass in 1, which is going to be the index, and then the number of elements to delete starting at that index. So we're going to start at 1, 0, 1, and we're going to delete 1 element, right? And what we return is the deleted element, or however many deleted elements, right? So single term precedence is going to be equal to John. I wish I could highlight this easier. John. And we can see on names, names has been mutated. It's been changed. John has been removed. So to start off, do we understand this idea of like mutating the original array?
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes it. And I think when I was learning how to code, this was something that was really tough for me to really understand. It's that like typically what a lot of these array methods will do is that they'll create a copy of this. They'll create a copy of this array, do some stuff to it, and then give it back to you. Much like what we've done in some of our workshops where it'll say like, return a version of this array, but with all the zeros taken out or something like that. It's a copy of the array. And the difference here is that it's going to change the original array. So when you call this, you're changing your original array, and it's good to know, because if your code elsewhere depends on that array, it can get thrown off, right? So here we have enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Why did you write 1 and 2? Like, I mean, 1 and 1 and 1. Here you wrote 1 and 2. Like, can you just explain that part again?
1 and 1 and 1 and 2. Is it in the code here? Could you give me a line number?
Oh, sorry. It's in the parameter, like the
here?
Yeah, normal parentheses. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the index, where to start. And then this is going to be num to delete. Numdel, right? So if I do 2 here, we're going to start at 0, 1, right? Start at index 1 and delete 2 elements. That's what
got
those.
it.
Yeah,
Got it.
cool. Sweet. Good deal. So here's our second example. Line 1, we have variable names, which is an array with elements Paul, George, John, Ringo. Line 3, we create a new variable called across the universe. And that's going to be equal to the result of calling splice on names. Splice on names. We're going to pass in 1. So it's going to start at the 0, 1. It's going to start here. And we're going to delete 2 elements. So we're going to delete George and John. So George and John are deleted. The return value is going to be George and John. And the original array is going to end up being Paul and Ringo. So down here, line 5, we're going to console log out what does names look like now? We can see up here, it looks like Paul and Ringo. Line 6, we log out what is the value of across the universe? What is the return value of calling names.splice? It's George, John. Yeah?
That's clear.
Yay, thank you. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Good, I'm glad. If it's not clear for anybody, feel free to chat or just hop on in. There's a lot of people, so I have to give an extra little bit of time in case anybody is fuzzy about it. Cool, moving on. You can optionally add new elements at the given index. What? Brenton, you're crazy. No, it's true. You can add elements using this. So there's a third parameter, third argument that you can pass in, and that is elements that you want to add. So we can add as many here as we want, right? It's after you add this third one, it's like third and then fourth, fifth, however many. So what we're going to do here is we have names, we have variable names equal to an array, Paul, George, Pete, John. Then we have variable former members. And what we're going to do is we're going to call splice on names. We're going to start at index 2, 0, 1, 2. So we're going to start at Pete. We delete 1. So the number that we delete is this. And then after we delete, we insert this value here. So now the original array is going to be Paul, George, Ringo, John. And the return value is going to be Pete. It's going to be what was deleted. So down here on line 7, if we console log out what names looks like now, it's Paul, George, Ringo, John. And line 8 is the return value, right? And that is Pete. So we can insert. This is what Splice is awesome for, is that we have a way of popping off an element. We have a way of pushing an element on, doing the same pop and like shifting and unshifting on the beginning of an element. And this is a great way for us to say, you know what, I want to insert it specifically at this index. You don't have to remove any elements either. If you provide a 0 here for the number to delete, then we won't delete any elements. So here we have names, Paul, George, Ringo, John, and we're going to call names.splice. We're going to start at index 2, 0, 1, 2, and then we're going to add Pete and Stuart after that index. So now the original array is going to be this. And because we didn't delete anything, the return value is going to be empty. Oh, sorry. It inserts it before that index. So it'll be like
So it becomes the new beginning of it becomes that index then.
it becomes that index. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Yes. So looking at names, now we have 0 Paul, George 1, 2 Pete, 3 Stuart, 4 Ringo, 5 John. Removed elements is an empty array.
So this is kind of like push, right? But it's like you can actually dictate where you want to actually like push it to, right?
Yeah, you can specify an index to push to, and with that you can also delete elements.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like push on steroids. Got it.
Yeah, it's like push on steroids.
Can you
Okay.
use
Mhm.
like I know if you wanted to like add it to the end, add it to the end of the array, could you use names.length -1?
Yes, you could. It's a little weird because at that point it's like, well,
Why not use push?
why? Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you could do. This will give you an index. And this first parameter is the start index. So yeah,
But push works for multiple elements as well, correct?
push does not work for multiple elements. Push will add one element. If you have an array, you're talking about like multiple.
Yeah, like putting
For elements.
multiple elements at the end of an array.
So like something like this, and you want to add it to removed elements. What you'll want to do is you'll want to do removed elements dot concat. Have you all seen concat before? You haven't,
No.
because I'm about to talk about it in like 2 minutes. We'll go over that.
I thought you can move like I thought you can push more than one element into an array, like using
You know
push.
what?
I thought it was one or more.
I could be wrong, and I am willing to admit it if I am. Let's let REPL decide.
What I was
ooh,
really thinking was to add the values store the values in a variable,
Mhm.
and then try to insert them using push. But I'm not sure if that will only add the first value to the array, or it'll add all the values that are within.
I think the tricky part there is if you store them in a variable, you really can't store more than one value in a variable. You can store a data structure. You can store like an array or an object, something that stores more than one
Yeah.
value, but you can't store like multiple values in a single variable.
Okay.
Are you
Cool.
referring to like a nested variable within another variable?
Yeah, I don't think that you can have nested variables. Variables are just like pointers. They're just ways of, they're like addresses, right? If I write down like 123 Main Street, I can't really have like a nested address. I can have an address that points to another address, but that's not really nested. That's just like a chain of addresses.
Basically like a chain of properties is what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. Wow, this guy really theoretical. But good questions. I was going to show something. I was going to show push real quick. So let's do an array of 1, 2, 3, 4 dot push. I guess I want to console log this out so that we can see what the result is. Okay, so push, and we're going to do 5 and 6. Ooh, what? Oh, okay. Sorry. This might actually do this. I did not know that. I could be wrong here. Let's do this. 5 and 6. And then let's log out what A is. What? That's weird. Is it? Oh, it's because I'm doing a. It's giving me what the result of. The result of that is. Let's see. Hey, wow, I did not know that. You can push takes more than one argument. That's pretty cool. You were right. I've stumped. You know what?
It was in the slides from yesterday. That's how
Was?
yeah, it was in the slides. Yeah,
Well,
one or more.
I clearly didn't read the slides from yesterday.
That's all good, man. You know more than all of us combined.
Apparently not. No, I think that's one of the things about like coding that I think is cool. I think that like coding is not about memorizing stuff. That like you don't have to, if you're not actively like working with .push every day, there's no reason to like retain it. You know, Google is gonna keep on providing us with the answer to whether or not push, or JavaScript itself, just like go in and be like, hey, does this work? Let me pull up a REPL and try it. Well, okay. And I think that like that's an important headspace.
Yeah, that's the advice everyone's been going. Like, don't memorize stuff, just kind of do it intuitively. Like,
Yeah,
stuff when you need it. Yeah.
because if you memorize stuff, I think it and you get into like a mindset of like I know things, you will be humbled and humbled hard. And you know, like it's harder, I think, to like have a growth mindset when you stick to like I know things and I like have knowledge. I think it's harder to grow that way. Okay, cool. Well, we've demonstrated things I don't know. Let's demonstrate things I do know, which is splice. Any questions? Yeah, exactly, Chris. You learn something new every day, even if it's stuff that you knew a while ago and forgot. Any other questions about splice before we move on?
I like actually just one extra thing about splice is if you don't put a second argument, you can erase everything to the end of the array. I really like doing that as well.
Yeah. Yep. Join concatenates. It takes the elements, all the elements of an array, and it puts them into a string. And the original array is not changed, but it gives you this nifty string. So if you're like, okay, I have Paul, George, John, Ringo, I want a string that has all of them combined, separated by a comma. Excuse me. You can call names.join, and it'll do just that. It will take them all and spit out. Well, it'll spit out this. I don't need to waste our time writing this. Here we have variable names with the array. We have variable join string, which is the result of calling names.join. And then we have a log out of the type of for this join string. And then we have what the join string is, which is Paul, George, John, and Ringo. Super handy. Here's our second example, and this shows that it takes in a parameter, which is like what you can separate all the elements with. So maybe you're like, I don't really want a comma, I want an and here. So you could say names.join And you can pass in and then your result will be Paul and George and John and Ringo. Cool. All right, moving on. Concat. Concat takes one array and it merges, it appends another array onto it. So kind of like what I was saying that push does. Push, let's see if I can, do I still have it up or did I delete it? I deleted it. What push does is it can take in multiple arguments, right? It can take in multiple like 5, 6, 7, 8 and add them all. This will take one array and it will add all the elements of that array to the previous array. So example, we have this older array with Ringo and John, right? This is a whole array in itself. And then we have younger with Paul and George. On line 9, we're going to create a new array all together now from calling concat on older. And we're going to pass in the array younger. So we're going to pass in this array and we're going to concat it on this array. If we log out what all together now is, we'll see that it's Ringo, John, Paul, George, all one array. And then we console log out what older is, and it's still just Ringo and John, right? The original array has not been mutated. This is really handy for like, sometimes you have an array and you've just put a bunch of stuff in it and you want to add all that stuff to another array. But unlike push, where we knew what we knew what all of our elements that we were going to put in were, this we can make it a little more dynamic. We don't have to know everything. We can put them in array 2 and then we can concatenate them on array 1. Any questions about this one?
This one just adds it to the just adds it to the existing one, and it just adds it to the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. So it's like it takes this and then it does this.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good question. Okay. So those are all the methods I'm going to show you. Let's talk about nested arrays. So arrays can hold any value. An element can be any value, which means that they can also hold other arrays. So this related things is an array with 2 elements. We have, let me even write it like this. We have 2 elements here, right? We have this array, Windows, Mac, OS, and then we have New York, Chicago. There's 2 elements, right? And then we can access different parts of them with this bracket notation because they're all arrays. So if we want to get the first element, right, we know how to do this. We do this bracket notation and then pass in 0. And that's going to give us this entire array, the element at index 0, Windows, Mac OS, this entire array. Well, if we want to get an element inside of one of these arrays, we can just use bracket notation like a second time. We can say, okay, give me the element at index 1. Okay, great. This is the element at index 1. All right, now give me the element on that. Give me the element at index 0. Okay, great. This is the element at index 1. This is the element at index 0. If we print out related things.length, the number of elements in this related things array, it's 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a quick question here,
Yeah.
relating also to concat.
Mhm.
Does concat work with nested arrays and adds it as, let's say I have an array and I want to concat it in a nested array?
Mhm.
Will it return in the well? How would I select the level where I could like insert the new
Ooh.
value.
You're saying like, okay, I have another array like let's cities is equal to like LA and I don't Tampa. I don't know.
Super Bowl, right?
Sure, yeah. And I want to specifically concatenate this to this
Correct.
array.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're going to do is you're going to access this array and then you're going to call concat on it, right? So first, let's access the array. The way that we would access this array, how would we get this element? What would I write here?
It is the second no, well, the first index.
Yeah.
The index number 1. So
Okay, so related things at 1, right?
mhm.
Awesome. That gives us the array. That gives us this array. And if I wanted to concatenate some elements to it, what would I do?
Then I use the concat method.
Yeah,
and-
absolutely.
okay.
So the only trick here is that this doesn't mutate the original array, right? So we would have to like reassign this element. We'd have to do something like this. We would have to say like, hey, this is going to give us, calling this is going to give us a new array, right? And I want to replace this with this new array. So do related
Okay.
things at 1 equals the result of that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Brandon, I think that Chris made a question for you in the chat.
Related things, concat cities. Chris? Yes, I think you were answering how I would go about doing this.
Yeah, I was just trying to answer it.
Yeah, awesome. That's, you got it right. Thanks for participating. Appreciate it.
I have a question.
Okay.
So for the code on line 13,
Mm-hmm.
are we able to add another index? And if we add another index after that, and let's say it's index 0, will we get the letter N from New York?
Ooh. Oh, I think maybe. That's a really good question. I am leaning towards yes. Let us pull up a REPL and figure that out. The reason that that is true, right, is because here, let's see if I can just copy all this code here. Copy all this. Put it in my REPL. And do, okay, cool. So we can even get rid of this. You're saying, very good question. Yeah, so this is an array, right? And then this is a string. And I think what you're pointing out here is that strings can also access based on index, right? So let's see. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We go, give me the element at 1, which is the entire array. Give me the element on that array at 0, which is New York, and then give me the character at 0 on this string, which is N.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. I agree. Okay, so that's a little bit about nested arrays. If we were going to loop through a nested array, I would encourage everybody to play around with this, and it'll be in the workshop, but you'll see this later on as we go. The way that we can loop through is we can use for loops, right? Like from a high level, if we wanted to loop through all of the elements in this top array, right? There's 3 elements. We would use a counter, right? We would use a for loop that starts at 0, starts at the 0th index, stops when I is 1 less than the length of this array. So 0, 1, 2. 2 is 1 less than 3. There are 3 elements, and increases increments by 1 each time. We're going to get the current element, right? So the first time around, the current element is going to be this array, then it's going to be Jack, and then it's going to be this array, right? Is everybody like with me just on that level?
Yeah, I do follow.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Jack is just a string, right? Or
Jack
is it?
is just a string. Yes. So we have a problem, right? We say, okay, I want to have this output. I want to print out each name one by one. Some of these names are in arrays. I don't know which ones, right? So we needed a way to determine as we go through and we get each element, right, to determine if it's an array or not. So what we can do is there's a handy dandy function here off of, you do capital A array dot is array, and then you pass in what you want to determine whether or not it's an array. In this case, it's this current element. So we do, hey, is this an array? Hey, is this an array? Hey, is this an array? And we'll get true, we'll get false, and we'll get true, right? And if we are going through this array of elements, and we know that some of those elements will be arrays, and for those arrays, we want to loop through all of their elements, right? What we can do is check if it's an array, run an if statement off of it, and then create another for loop. Start at 0, and then say J stops whenever it's 1 less than that element's length. Increase by 1. Get the current name inside of that element. So for like the first one here, it'll go Jane, then Mel, and then print out whatever the name is. So it'll iterate through this array. It'll get to the end of it. This for loop will expire. And then we'll go to the next element. We'll go to Jack. Jack it's not an array. It won't pass this. So maybe we'd have an else statement down here that just prints it out. Then we get elements Rowan, David, Meg. We go through each one. We print them out. And then this for loop expires again. And we go to the next iteration of our outer for loop here. So that's how we can go through and loop through nested arrays.
I'm still confused. Why if Jack is false, why is it still being printed?
I think that there's supposed to be like some code that's not showing up at the bottom here, maybe because I moved it or deleted it or something, but I think there's supposed to be like if it's an array, do this stuff, else console log Jack, console log element.
Oh, okay, just to make sure. So the final result should be without Jack, right?
If we're doing this, if we don't have that print statement, then yes, then it would look like that.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, really good question.
I've never done 2 for loops, by the way. The second question. So you wrote J and you used I before. So is it like bad if I use 2 I's? Like if I use I for the first for loop and then I use I again, is that going to create a problem or no?
It could. Remember, because of scope, we have 2 different blocks here. We have this top block, and then we have this inner block. If you're using let, they shouldn't be a problem because the block that you're in down here should know to use I. But like as a developer, I think it's confusing.
Yeah, I just use 2 different variables.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good question. Okay, cool. Moving on. So, final point here tonight is that typically nested arrays are used to build a grid, right? So like we have rows and columns in a grid, right? The row is going to be the array inside of this nested array, and the column is going to be like the actual element here. So here we have a grid. We have an array with 3 rows with 3 elements in it, right? Each of those elements have the values 1, 2, and 3. So we have 3 rows, and within each row we have 3 elements. So another way you could think about it is that this is the first column, the second column, the third column. So we want to build an array with all of the values from the first column. So 1, 1, and 1. The way we can do that is we can create a new array, right? We're going to use bracket notation to create a new array. And then we're going to do grid at 0, 0, right? Give me the first array, the first index. Then give me the second array, first index. Third array, first index, right? So do you see how all of these zeros stay the same, right? While this first one increments by 1, this one goes 1, 2, 3, and this stays 0, 0, 0. That's how we can go 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, but also 0, 0, 0. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Awesome. This is like a kind of tricky one because you'll get questions sometimes that are like, take a nested array and 1 by 1 print this out diagonally. Do like 1, 2, and 3. And what you'll have to do is a for loop. And you'll say, okay, you want to go diagonally. So you want to go down, right? You want to go through each array. So I'm going to create let's call this row even. Start at row 0, and we're going to end at row grid.length, row plus plus. And then you'll do an inner for loop. Or actually, you don't even need the inner for loop. You could just do, we want this to increase each time. And we know that row is going to increase each time. So you could say like console.log grid at row, right? So I can use a counter. I can use like a for loop to have a variable that's going to increase in number each time, and I can play some games. I can do some little cool printouts, right? So what happens here is it starts off row is 0. So it's going to print out whatever's at 0, 0, right? What's at 0, 0 here? 0, 0, right? That's 1, right? Then row is going to, we're going to complete this for loop. Row is going to update and become 1. So now we want, I've written grid, row, row. These are just variables. And those variables now mean 1. They have a value of 1. Right? So now we go to row 1, column 1. That prints out 2. Now row becomes 2. We try to find 2, 2, right? That's going to end up being 3. The third row, the third column. Did we kind of follow that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. This doesn't have to be, you don't have to like 100% know this right now. It's okay if this is a little bit weird, but if you can follow it at all, I would recommend that you like grab a REPL or something and you just play some, like play around with setting up some for loops and doing maybe something like let call equals 0, like create another for loop and play around with what you can access using these two variables in regards to this grid. It's super fun. Okay. So what did we learn? We learned about methods, right? We learned about splice, where you can insert, it's push on steroids, right? You can insert an element and also delete elements at a specific index. It mutates the original array. We learned about join, which takes all of the elements in the array and combines them into a string. We learned about concat, which takes one array and appends all of the elements in another array to it. And then we also learned about nested arrays, which arrays can have elements that are arrays. We can use bracket notation to access the different elements within nested arrays, and that nested arrays are commonly used to denote grids. And if we wanted to check if an array is an array, we can do array.isArray. Yeah? Any questions? Good stuff. Awesome. Then what I will do is I will